For now then.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our series of Lunch and Learns as part of the Spark programme by Bruntwood Works. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Spark programme, it's an initiative that Bruntwood Works had been working on behind the scenes for a little while anyway. And then as the pandemic hit, everything got turbocharged and it got pulled together very quickly. Bruntwood Works were really conscious that they have all these amazing customers, people with loads of knowledge, and people crying out for that kind of support and community at a time when they couldn't physically be in the spaces. So since last summer, they've run advisory sessions, webinars, training sessions, all kinds of different bits of online activity to help to offer that support to their customer base and to the wider business community. For those of you who I've not met before, my name's Ilona and I'm the co-founder and director of Elevate. And we've been delighted to work closely with Bruntwood Works across the whole programme. I am actually now also doing a bit of behind the scenes filming today for our flagship Spark event, which is the Spark Summit coming up on the 25th of March. So do have a little look at that and get booked on. We've got some incredible speakers lined up for the day. And the idea behind this series of Lunch and Learns is actually some themes that have come out of our Peer Networks programme. So bringing together lots of different leaders, SMEs in the area, and talking about concerns they may have, problems, the different things that they're juggling with, and then bringing in some experts and different views into these sessions to help explore those issues in a little bit more detail. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise to anyone that one of the big questions that's come up is, are we ready to reopen? We all can't wait. You know, we're chomping at the bit to get back out there, start seeing people again face to face, have those meetings, have those events. But there is obviously also a real anxiety there at both an individual level and at a corporate level as to how we do that in the right way, how we manage those conversations, and to make sure that we're actually doing things in the right order that make sense with the right level of support. So no small topic at all to cover. So I'm very, very grateful to all of our panelists for getting involved today. So over the course of the next hour, we are going to hear from Lisa Morton, who's the CEO and founder of Roland Dransfield PR, Chris McKenna, who's the director at Downtown in Business, Anthony Morrow, CEO and founder of Open Money, Phil Mayall, who is the Regional Director for the North West and Wales of Muse Developments, and Hough from TfGM and Transport for Greater Manchester have obviously got a huge role to play in some of that competence, and we will be sending out some further support after this event as well. So what I'm going to ask our panelists to consider first is to put themselves with their employer hat on and think about what their teams have been struggling with during lockdown, the things that they're maybe looking forward to about coming out of lockdown, but also any concerns that have been raised. So if I could come to you first, Lisa, to tell us a little bit about those conversations with your team.
Yeah, of course. So, well, we are a very creative team. So when we initially went into lockdown, it was a real change for us because we'd never done remote working before. I had two things that I always refused. One was flexible working, the other was wearing jeans. So that has all gone out of the window now. And obviously we've gone through a hell of a lot as a small business. Initially there were concerns about livelihood, salaries, job security, and there have been some very, very difficult decisions we've had to make as a team. Fortunately, everybody that we've had to let go of, we've managed to find new positions. So that's, you know, that's been a great comfort, really. We've never had any issues as a team about safety, to be honest, because we've got a huge amount of space in the office and we've taken advice from our business community and property community about how to come back in a COVID secure way. But I definitely think there is a need for teams to and business leaders to give guidance. I don't think it's enough to say to people, do what you want, do what you feel. You've got to create the culture and consult on your team about what they feel comfortable with. Fortunately, our team have really felt very comfortable about working together, although we're not having to do that, you know, that ridiculous commute every single day. And I think going forward, it'll be a real hybrid of a working, you know, balance now.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. So then coming to you next, Anthony, I think there's a perception that everyone's been really quiet over lockdown, and Open Money is definitely not been a quiet business over the last year. How have you managed your team being on lockdown, opening remotely? Have there been struggles within the team, and what are the conversations about the return to the office?
Yeah, when lockdown originally happened in March, we sort of took the decision at that point, because I'd been down to London the week before and it was totally dead, and it sort of said, oh, something's not right here. So we sort of come back from London and said, right, we're just going to work from home for 3 months. And we thought we were being overly cautious on 3 months and thinking, well, you know, if something happens within there, then so be it. But and we're quite fortunate in that we don't have any customer facing, we don't make anything, we don't have any physical customer facing requirements, and we don't have any sort of shop real estate. So for us just to up sticks and go and work from home, on the face of it, was pretty straightforward. What we found was that a lot, because of the nature of our business, we also have quite a young workforce, and a lot of those who lived in central Manchester were living alone, so or in spaces that meant that working from home was, you know, more of a challenge than it was, you know, for myself, who, you know, we're garden and, you know, fortunate enough to have a house where we don't have to fall over each other to do that. So we found that as it drew on, you know, there was more. We were hearing more from people saying, you know, I'm really missing the social side of the work. You know, we did what we could to try and keep that collaborative side going through, you know, Zoom meetings and that, but quickly that reaches, you know, the extent to which it's useful. So when we opened the office up again, once lockdown came out in the summer, we opened it on a rota system and said, look, we'll open it for 3 days a week. Those people who want to come in, let us know and you can come in. And we did it 3 days a week. So what we didn't want was people coming in and there only being 1 or 2 other people in there. So we could at least organize it so there was a number. And we only really got about 10 or 15 people in there. And I think largely that was because there were still people who were slightly nervous about public transport or traveling into the office as opposed to the office bit. And then obviously Christmas came and it was, you know, it was clear that there was going to be another lockdown. So what we're doing is we're in the WeWork at St. Peter's Square. So from Monday, people will be able to go into the communal area if they want to use it. And again, letting us know, you know, rota system to see how people who wants to go in and when. And then in April, we'll open up our actual office to those people who want to come in. Longer term, we're looking at what that actually means. So what sort of space are we going to need? I think, you know, one of the biggest challenges, so 12 months ago, you know, the big question for me was what sort of space are we going to need over the next 5 years as we grow? And it's still the same question, but it's more around, you know, we're never going to go back to the space where everyone needs a desk or everyone needs to be in the office all the time. I just don't think that's where we're going to get. I mean, we're at 85 people at the moment, and half of those have come in since lockdown.
Wow.
So you know,
that is a challenge.
a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of people who've never been in the office or have never met, you know, many of their colleagues or with any of their colleagues. So that's been a challenge in terms of how we've managed to do that. But I think certainly for us, I think going forward there will be a sort of hybrid where the space is very much around business needs, collaborative spaces, training spaces, as opposed to a space where everyone comes in every day and sits down to do their work.
Wonderful. And obviously, you know, echoing some of Lisa's comments there, that by not having the office, that may have felt like it was a bit of an obligation to go there. We've kind of realised what we miss, and it is that collaboration, the social aspect, and getting back into those spaces. And I love that you're already breaking it down into kind of more manageable chunks over the return, that it isn't just this is one thing and that's what's going to happen. I'm sure your team really appreciate being involved in those conversations. And if I could come to you next then, Phil, if you could give us a bit of an insight into how your teams have been working over kind of the various lockdowns and what the plans are to return.
Yeah, no problem, thank you. Well, I'll start with a confession. that when we first went into lockdown, I jumped into micromanage mode. So it was, well, this is how we've always done things. So look, and it's not that we don't ever trust our people. I want to get rid of that point straight away. But it was down to, well, right, take stuff home and make sure everyone's logged on at this time and make sure garbage. That are just silly. And it's only when you go through these things that hopefully you learn and you think, what was I even thinking? The messages.
That's such a lovely, honest way of approaching it. We all see that class, and like to have somebody be like, do you know what, we just got it wrong and we've learned from it is so refreshing.
It was silly. It was silly in many ways, because nobody said this to me, but you end up looking back and thinking, well, all I was doing there was saying I don't trust somebody to do the work that they were doing before we locked down. And it was also then adding a level of burden of then people saying, actually, I can't log on at that time. Is that okay? Well, why do I need to be spending my time and their time doing that? So we've certainly evolved our thinking over towards a more kind of flexible type approach that is very much driven by outcome achievement and responsibility, as opposed to a clock card type mentality. But what does that mean for us? Well, that like very much like Lisa and Anthony described, we're absolutely collaborators. We get things built, but we don't build them ourselves. The thing that people see on site is the end product that we then ask somebody else to do for us. We're a knowledge business, we're an information business, and we absolutely trade off conversations and interactions in the office. Hearing I bumped into such a body. Such a body is looking for such a space. Oh, are they? Right. Oh, that is absolute stock in trade, and Google can't produce that for us. The internet can't produce that for us, and Teams actually struggles to produce that for us. So, but it's now. So that's remains very clear to us, and we have, to a large extent, been surviving rather than thriving. It's my view.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
But
sorry, continue.
So I was just going to finish with that. What it actually does is put a challenge back on us to create the culture in the office where people feel like, yeah, absolutely, I want to be back there. I want to be collaborating, and that'll be physical in terms of some changes, but it'll also be, I don't know, I suppose, atmosphere and whatever things you can't bottle and describe. So that's where we think.
Wonderful, yeah. And what I say is, so much of that is echoed by what we found to Elevate. That our background is all very much people based. That's we're natural extroverts. We're social people that like having those voices around us and things that will kind of spark those different conversations, and being able to walk down the street and bump into someone and have those kind of different conversations is something that we're really missing. And so as we start looking then at that wider business community, so outside our kind of internal teams, that one of the reasons that I've loved working in Greater Manchester over the last few years is because it's so welcoming, it's so collaborative, people share their contacts, they're always really happy to kind of go for meetings and chat about what they're doing. And that's clearly something that we're missing. And like you say, those online platforms help, but they don't replace. So I'd just like to come to you next, Chris, as your kind of role, as you've been keeping in touch, so well with all your kind of members and partners across the kind of downtown networks, not just across Manchester, but in the other cities you're active in. What's the kind of feeling from the business community about wanting to get back out and about?
Yeah, far greater than it's ever been at the minute. We recently got the dates of May 17th, which we'll be able to do the live events again. We've started sending invites out for events, and whereas in sort of August, September, October, where we were able to do the small business events, we're getting zero pushback this time. A lot of the larger organisations last year were coming back, and it was company policy that it wasn't seen as business critical, so it's very much online or nothing. Whereas this time the appetite, people are raring to get back out there. As you said, the online stuff has been great, but it's been a year now. I think people are it's tiresome, and it's just not the same. You can't replicate what you can at a live event online. So yeah, we've been getting invites out, and as I say, the uptake's been brilliant across the regions we work. So yeah, we're very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think I had invites coming from you more or less as Johnson stopped talking. It was like, we're back. And it's, I get a lot of, emails come through that's like, do this, do this. And like the excitement of having those emails back in my inbox and like, there's an event, you can come and do this in person. Was just wonderful to see. One of the things that Elevate's really proud to be a part of is the United City campaign. So some of you, particularly around Manchester, will have seen the billboards and everything that went up before Christmas, and some of the great work that happened when the campaign kicked off. Those of you a bit further afield may have fixed. I know we were lucky to get, when I say lucky, we had a very skilled team that made sure we got national coverage. So you may have also seen it. And whilst it is a Manchester-centric campaign, I think everything that underlies it is really relevant regardless of where you're based. So I'm going to ask Lisa just to give us a little overview of what the United City campaign is and the role that it plays in the reopening.
Yeah, so well, I got a call from Frank McKenna out of the blue saying, "Kid, I've got an idea, are you in?" And he told me what the idea was, and I was like, I am definitely in, because the thing that had been running through my head when I was going into Manchester, even in lockdown, into our office, was just how heartbreaking it was to see just the desolation, really. I mean, we've all seen it now, but in those early days, to have seen literally Deansgate with nothing on it, it was actually, it was a heart-wrenching moment, really. So, and I felt very much that when we were able and safe to do so, that if we weren't there for our city, the city wasn't going to be there for us. So it totally made sense that we pulled together a team of business leaders that could help to try and guide Manchester and encourage employers to lead their teams back in a safe way. Sir Richard was very much behind it, and so was Andy, and they were very happy for it to be a non-political organisation, so it could sit outside of political messaging, which we've seen has been kind of, there've been some conflicts around some of that over the last 6 months or so. We were leading on a work from work campaign, and it was very important to us because when it was okay to come back into work and we had the whole Eat Out to Help Out, and it was quite interesting when you go into a meeting on Monday morning up to at Peter Square and there are people like falling into Albert Schloss in a leather pants and a false tan. It was clear that people were happy to go into the city centre for cocktails, but they weren't necessarily coming into the city centre to work. And without that whole ecosystem, without people being back in the city in big numbers, then the whole thing would fall over. And what we were finding is that SMEs and organisations where they perhaps had their decision making in the city or certainly in the UK, they could help some of their teams come back even in a part-time way or on a shift pattern. But the big professional firms in particular, that make the whole of the heart of Spinningfields, for example, there was no leadership there in terms of helping people to come back. And it felt that the disparity between those who have and those who don't have was very clear at that time. There's a huge gulf between if you're in a very nice postcode as a senior partner professional services firm, with an espresso machine in your garden office, to the kid who's in a less beautiful postcode, who is an inch, the bed's an inch from where they work every day. So we felt it was the onus was on employers to make sure they had space for their people to come back because the office is a leveller. So we were all going out for that, and then we just got the work from home again message. So we felt it was cavalier, given the spike that we all witnessed, to do that. So we pushed on other things. It still stands for that. We will be pushing on work from work when it's safe to do so. The organisation has now got over 100 members. It's about campaigning and independent research. And what the next two things that we're doing, aside from the billboards, all Manx want for Christmas is 2, which we didn't get, but at least it kind of felt that we were all pulling together as a community as we do. We're about to launch a United City helpline next week, which will be in partnership with Peninsula and Bright. And there'll be 200 consultants it's a free phone number, so any business in Greater Manchester can actually call the number and get free advice on how they can help to return their teams in a safe way. And we've got people within the United City membership who can actually physically help you do that. So from COVID secure working environments. And then we're also going to canvass our membership to find out really people's views on bringing people back into offices, because we don't feel that the date that's been set by the government now is right. You know, if you can come in and you can have cocktails, you can get your hair cut and you go to the gym, why should we not be working back into, you know, COVID secure offices? Because that helps to switch the ecosystem back on.
Fantastic. And it's been such a difficult line to tread, and you know, the whole team there have done it amazingly well. But it's not, you know, that we don't think we should lock down when we should. It's not about, you know, pretending that COVID doesn't exist. It's just about making sure that we're doing the right things at the right time. And there is that danger that if you're the person making the decisions, and I'm in this incredibly fortunate position that, you know, I've got an office at home, I've got a garden, I do have that espresso machine sitting in my kitchen, which is basically my best friend. And I find it tricky being there all the time. So how on earth do you find when you're balancing a laptop on an ironing board and doing everything? Is a very different world. That helpline sounds incredible,
Yeah.
And we will of course be pushing that out through all of our channels for people who want that support, and just an incredible thing to be able to offer. And it's bringing that spirit of Greater Manchester back that, you know, was spoken about and that we really kind of love and miss. It's great to see that that's still kind of, you know, cracking on behind the scenes. City centres have obviously got like such a key role to play, and I was listening to a webinar some time ago with various different kind of political leaders, and they're saying, you know, we are a city region, so whilst it's important that we focus on our town, and you know, there's some great changes going on there. You know, I live out in Wigan, so it's been nice in some ways to see the increase in footfall and some of the changes that are going on, but without having that really vibrant city, we are not going to get the investment, we're not going to get everything else for the rest of the region to be able to thrive. So one of the things we've touched on a couple of times is the confidence in travel. So because we are the city region, we have a lot of people like me who, you know, battled with Northern Rail for some time and never thought I'd say a day when I miss jumping on that train every day. But we do need to be able to move around the region, to be able to get back into these offices, to be able to get back closer to what we need to do. So Andrew, if I come to you, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what kind of support is there for businesses who are starting to reopen or looking ahead to the dates when they will be able to bring people back into the city centre?
Yeah, absolutely. Afternoon, everybody. Yes, so there's probably three main things to mention, but before I do that, just quickly to say that obviously one of the main things that we need to do as an organisation is respond to the situation. So I'm taking lots of notes here that I'll be feeding back to my colleagues who are also having lots of discussions with key stakeholders such as yourselves, because clearly we're going to have to adapt our offer and look to lock in some of the positive behaviour that we've seen, but also obviously change in response to the circumstances. So yeah, thanks for the information so far. It's really helpful to help us do that. Clearly, one of the main aspects there being a more flexible approach to travel, and obviously, therefore, the ticket offer across GM needs to respond to that. So, for example, our Clipper ticket, which we launched a while back on Metrolink, is an example to start with, but there's hopefully lots more to come in the future based on these types of conversations. So I suppose it's the short, medium and long term, really, just to sort of quickly highlight that probably not the time to go through all the detail, but there's lots happening out on the network to give people that confidence to start using public transport again in particular. And what we're finding from the survey data is that actually those that are using it have got more confidence than those that are currently not, because they can see what's happening out there, whereas people that, like myself, who've been at home the whole time, are sort of speculating as to what's happening out on the network. Then in the medium term, yeah, we need businesses to be looking at their travel planning activity and how they encourage sustainable travel. So we've created some self-help web pages, which, as you say, we'll send the link out to afterwards. And we're also, throughout March and possibly beyond, we've made one-to-one online surgeries available. So if any businesses out there want to talk to us about a specific travel issue that they have, they can book on and speak to myself or one of my colleagues with regards to their circumstances, and we'll do our best to help. And then there are, of course, on the TfGM web pages, there's lots of information on coronavirus response and those travel changes that we've made to improve people's confidence in using public transport in particular. And then finally, just to say, in terms of the long term, we've got our 2040 vision that's been refreshed, and using the city centre as an example, we do have a target where we want 90% of journeys to be by sustainable modes by 2040, and there's some detailed plans there with regards to how we reach that. But of course, we can't do it without the support from businesses and their employees, and obviously that's looking through the lens of clean air and carbon reduction and all the things that we've sort of reduced our focus on. But ultimately, that's what we need to come back to in the longer term. And as I said earlier, some of the good things that we've seen, particularly around active travel, and we need to lock in some of that behaviour, and there's huge amounts of work taking place to help with that. But essentially, we're listening, and we're also on hand to help. And there'll be further information sent after the session. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's so good to hear that, like, it is that real collaborative approach that, you know, you can have the best transport system in the world, but if people aren't confident in using it, it's not doing its job properly. So I'm sure there are people listening to this who'll be more than happy to feedback with their thoughts, and those one-to-one sessions will be incredibly valuable, because obviously every business is going to have slightly different concerns, working in slightly different areas. So we will again highlight those to people coming out. You know, I'm someone who, you know, pre-pandemic travel all over the place, absolutely fine, never really thought about it. And even for me kind of getting back on the train, there was that kind of sense of, well, what's it going to be like? Like, how's it going to work? Will I be close to people and whatever? And it has honestly been seamless in terms of, you know, the social distancing, the sanitising stations, you know, the staff in those stations do an incredible job of making people feel safe and welcome. So there is some great work going on there. And also really, really important to hear that sustainable side as well. As, you know, a lot of work that we're doing, you know, across the region and across the north to get towards that net zero. And obviously the risk is that if we need to move about, that we need to go back into kind of individual car journeys. So really great to see those things tying together, that, you know, we come back into a much more sustainable way if possible. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on is around city centre developments, that I think we kind of took for granted for a while, how much work is going on in the city centres, how many cranes you'd see when you were out and about, and it's like, oh look, another building, this is happening, and didn't think anything of it. And now whenever I see somebody commit to spending and developing, like, I get like a really warm, fuzzy feeling, because I'm like, it's all going to be okay. So things like, you know, Bruntwood committing building a new hotel in Manchester city centre, you know, would have been exciting at any time, but it feels like there's a real sense of commitment and optimism. So I was just going to come to you, Phil, to give us kind of your insight into that kind of, you know, appetite for development. You know, is everything still going ahead full throttle? Did we see a bit of a dip to kind of view in terms of people still investing in those developments?
Yeah, no, I absolutely shared your views on seeing development activity continuing, obviously from a professional point of view, but a personal point of view as a kind of believer in cities and towns. And I also share your pain of travelling in from Wigan as well. So I live in Wigan as well, so I know how painful that journey is at times. So what do we say? Well, it sounds kind of glib, doesn't it? But change drives opportunity, and what we're seeing is an element of change. What we're actually seeing is probably, and this has been said before, but trends that were starting are being accelerated. So again, I think you've heard kind of almost unanimous view of why offices are important, but they won't necessarily be the same offices. So there'll be change coming through that, which drives requirement from a developer's point of view, a developer trader's point of view, new product. And there is no lack of appetite, both in terms of occupiers and investors on that front. We will see impacts on residential with a greater acceleration towards city centre living is here to stay, but there'll be more emphasis on shared amenity, workspace, space generally, outside space, and critically, which is, you know, a theme I kind of harp on about a lot, is as a developer, less focus on just the four walls and a roof and more focus on connecting it into the amenity, the green amenity that actually our city and our towns have in abundance, but are just underplayed, underconnected, underplayed, not necessarily safe in some respects, but could be. So development will definitely continue and it will respond to those changes, and there absolutely is appetite. The one surprising fact that I'll kind of leave the point on is we've seen more and more over the last 12 months inquiries from businesses out of town looking to move in town, and the prediction was actually the reverse. Well, people won't want to be in crowded city centres and what have you. It's the other way around, and I think what that is linked to is the flexible working side of things, where if people are living in city centres, actually in a bizarre way, it's easier to be more flexible because you can bob in and out of the office. It's not a day decision, it's an hour decision. And that kind of route back to talent and what have you is actually stronger than ever, and getting the right people to work for you. So yeah, it's actually really exciting times, notwithstanding we're going to come into choppy waters in the economy, of course we are, but long-term prognosis I think is strong.
That is so good to hear from someone who's got the inside track on it, because you do have that assumption that, you know, are people, you know, just going to be deserting our city centres, and what does that mean? And one of the things that I think is really important is when we think about our city centres and our town centres, is the reason that we want to be in them is rarely because of the office. The reason that we want to be in them is because of their proximity to, you know, some of those, you know, open spaces, but also particularly to kind of retail and hospitality and cultural elements. And we're going to get a little bit political here, because why not? In terms of, there's been some dates set for when you can do certain things and not others. And I know one of the things the United City campaign is really keen on is to actually be able to kind of challenge those decisions with data and be like, well, this is fine if there's reason for it, but it does lead to some kind of slightly weird scenarios. And one of the ones that Lisa and I discussed yesterday is we're actually going to end up in this position where a museum can have takeaway in its cafe, it can have people in its gift shop, but it can't open its actual gallery because they're not until a later stage. So I know, Lisa, you work with some brilliant people across the kind of, you know, hospitality industry. Can you give us a bit of the sense of the feeling as to, you know, that industry that's gone through such a tough year, what their views are on some of those dates that have been set out in the roadmap?
I think the main concern now is obviously there's a huge amount of positivity, but the main concern is ongoing restrictions. So every time an establishment has to close and then open up again, it's costing them a hell of a lot of money. They've lost a hell of a lot of money, and they've had to spend a hell of a lot of money in actually making those environments COVID secure. And I don't know if, you know, if anyone that followed the hospitality UK stats over the summer, you know, the transmission rates of hospitality were the smallest that there were anywhere. So I think, you know, that sector had taken so much responsibility in making sure that they could bring people back into their environments in a very safe way. Again, this week, you know, Sacha Lord has had a success around his judicial review about there being no scientific evidence or any evidence whatsoever to suggest that you need a substantial meal in order to be safe in a hospitality sector. So that's been overturned, and that obviously that's the reason it's not going to feature now in the regulations around hospitality. I think there's a real feeling that there's nobody within government or advisors around government that really truly understand the challenges that hospitality sector's been through. You know, there was some numbers thrown around this week about the average rental for a hospitality outlet is absolutely nowhere near reality. So there's a real need and desire for a Minister of Hospitality who really understands what the sector's suffering from, and that, you know, much anticipation around the budget today, because any more draconian measures and penalties financially on that sector is going to probably put, you know, there's numbers about 42% of hospitality outlets not even potentially opening. So they need some real support to help them to trade out of what's been a terrible 12 months, not more austerity. And I think they feel they've been kicked aside, because hospitality, I think, is the third biggest employer in the UK. It's massively important for tourism, placemaking, for bringing people into city centres. It's a fundamental part of the ecosystem, and yet it's not been given the same attention that perhaps other sectors have been given.
Absolutely, it is. It's part of the fabric of what we love, isn't it? It's that space. It's for not just our real social personal side, but how many business meetings taking place in hospitality venues. You know, Manchester Central have done some amazing work showing the value that things like conferences have to be able to bring people back into the city. So it's, you know, there's such a commercial driver there. It isn't just, you know, wouldn't it be nice if we could pop out for a coffee? It's like there's a whole industry there that we rely on and definitely needs our support. Wonderful. So I'm going to just come to each of our speakers in turn to give me kind of any final comments, something that you might be looking forward to around reopening, or, you know, we've just touched on it there. If there's any kind of, you know, calls for support that you want to see either from central government, local government, or, you know, from the kind of business community that will enable us to do this in a better way. So I'm going to come to you first, Chris, for just any final comments on behalf of, you know, downtown or the membership.
What I'm looking forward to, just getting back out there. I think, you know, the majority of our team, probably 50% of the time is spent out their office anyway, either at events or meetings with members and partners. So very much looking forward to that. Being able to travel to other cities we operate, which of course we've not been able to do over the last 12 months. So getting down to Birmingham, London, very much looking forward to that. And yeah, seeing you all face to face. I think most of the budget was leaked, so I don't think I'm going to go out and see anything that I've not already read. We published a manifesto last year. I think some of that was implemented. The furlough extension is a positive, especially for the hospitality sector, as Lisa said. It's going to take them a while to bounce back. So, but yeah, we've got, you know, awards dinners planned for the summer and further on. So not having to stand a metre apart when we do go to these events will be nice. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to now. I think people have started to see that light at the end of the tunnel and are far more optimistic this time around that we are coming to the end of it. So yeah, and a pint again.
Yeah, it's felt a long lockdown, this one. I mean, it seems weird that we now talk about lockdowns in the plural and they're just something that happened. But yeah, January was a long old month, and it does think that some of that optimism is coming back, and I will be straight in your diary for that coffee as soon as we're allowed out. So if I can come to you next then, Anthony, in terms of, you know, the what you're looking forward to and any kind of additional support that you think we might need. You just on me, Anthony.
That's a sign of lockdown fatigue, that, isn't it? I think pretty basic things. I think, you know, you can ask that question of what you're most looking forward to and try and come up with some big answers, but I think it's just really simple stuff like that's been, you know, echoing a lot what Chris has just said there. You know, just getting back into meeting people. So having these meetings, but in physical, it's just, you know, they're not a necessity, but they're just so much better and just enjoyable. And I think what this whole saga has shown is that the importance of social activities, whether or not it's, you know, the theatres, you know, going to the pub, eating out, they're absolutely vital to everyday lives. And so being able to enjoy them again, you know, it just feels like a massive win, isn't it? And shows how we've taken it for granted. And I think
people have said that thing that, you know, that we've realised that the little things are the big things. That, yeah, you know, what we now look forward to are the things that we perhaps took for granted.
Yeah, and I just hope that, you know, there's so much enthusiasm and optimism out there that actually you know, the early milestones that are coming, particularly, you know, something like, you know, the beer gardens in April. You know, I just hope that, you know, this common sense applied by everyone, because it would be appalling if, you know, it doesn't go as according to plan. and we get to somewhere where we don't want to be. So, you know, that's a bit of negativity, but probably driven by false dawns we've had over the last 12 months.
And I don't think it is negativity. I think it's just that, it's that reminder, isn't it, that like we're not out yet. Like we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but there's still some work that we all need to do, kind of keep each other safe, so that we can all get back to all of those things that we love. Wonderful. Andrew, could I come to you next then? What are you kind of looking forward to? Just on mute there, Andrew. You set a trend, Anthony. We're in it now.
Yes, done that all too often. Looking forward to not doing that anymore. Yes, I'm probably going to stick to the day job, if you like. But I'm sure, like everybody here and everybody listening, it's amazed me how incredibly busy it's still been in my little bedroom here. And suppose I'm in terms of the day-to-day work, I'm looking forward to getting back into Manchester and seeing the fruits of our labour to some extent, and going back to what I was saying before with regards to locking in some of the positives that we've seen. I'm sure you're all familiar with Chris Boardman's plans for GM and the B network and the funding that we're receiving. So I'm really hoping over this year and beyond, we're going to see a real difference with regards to active travel. So we've seen a lot more leisure cycling. I'm sure, like a lot of people, have been taking the kids out on bikes and going out at weekends. Our role now is to see whether with all the plans that we already had and have obviously been given more momentum, can we now move that on a stage to transfer those leisure rides into commuting and business trips. And I really like to believe we'll see that. And an example, perhaps, yesterday I was on a webinar, and a local NHS trust was saying they just carried out a staff survey, and they discovered that their active travel rates amongst their staff had doubled from 10% to 20%. And obviously that was absolute music to my ears, and I'm looking forward to actually going out and seeing that on the ground, so to speak. Brilliant.
And I think that's one of those things that the more normal active travel becomes, the more people will do it. And, you know, a lot of the issue has been around safety sometimes, that it's like, well, I would walk that way or I would cycle that way, but I'll be totally on my own. So actually, like, that becoming the norm and people around, and obviously in conjunction with, you know, the lighting and security that we need to see. I think we have all really appreciated those daily walks, because sometimes it's the only thing we get to do. So it'll be really nice to be able to kind of incorporate those as we go back out again. So could I come to you next, Phil, then, in terms of either what you're looking forward to or additional support?
Yeah, I suppose similar themes to what you've already heard. People, looking forward to kind of re-engaging with not just colleagues and the team at a personal level, but, you know, those passing encounters in the city where even when I'm in at the moment, it's very much a kind of waving of a hand across the street rather than a walk across, shake hands and have a natter. So very, very much looking forward to that, and seeing the city thriving again. Because I mean, that's been the fantastic thing about the last 10, 15 years, how the city has changed, and towns, how they're so much more active and getting back to that. In terms of support, it's a once in a generation opportunity, this, to really focus on, very much with a northern hat on, the levelling up agenda and investing in this place. And if we, you know, if the government, and whichever government in the future, is serious about improving the economy, well, there could be exponential growth of investing in the north, because frankly we're coming off such a low base in terms of infrastructure and everything else. So I just urge them to grasp that, and it's very much connected back to some of the things Andrew was saying around sustainable transport. We've all noticed the difference in air quality and what have you from the lack of car trips generally. Well, you know, let's not give that up as a payment for going back into the city. We can, I think it's realistically over a period of time, we can have both if the investment goes with it.
Absolutely. And I think whilst, you know, COVID has given us this really kind of short-term horrific problem, that clean air has actually been going for a long time. I think the stats were something around 1,300 people every year in Greater Manchester die partially as a result of the air quality. You know, there's some really shocking stats there that actually, if we have had this kind of time where we forced a bit of a reset, we've looked at our health and well-being, then actually, like, why would we go back and do the things that aren't good for us if we've got the opportunity of doing them in a healthier and more sustainable way? So last but not least then, Lisa, what can we kind of expect to see next from United City? I know you touched on a couple of points there, and then kind of from your point of view as a business owner and employer, is there more support that we could use?
So from United City, as I say, we'll be launching the helpline next week, and then we'll be consulting with the membership, and then really trying to drive more engagement with other businesses in the city centre. And as you said before, it's not about forgetting about the other boroughs, but the fact that with the strength of the city centre will drive success in those other boroughs too. So we'll be kicking on with that now. We've got clearer messaging about dates and stuff like that. In terms of, you know, I feel that, you know, work is not just about work. You know, you go to work for lots of reasons. So I'm looking forward to people being back in work, because, you know, I was saying earlier before in the office that, you know, we spent every day of our working lives just looking at the next thing to laugh about. So, you know, you can have the odd funny Zoom call, but it's not the same as being together as a team. In terms of what I'm looking forward to, I just want to go to Castlefield Bowl Summer in the city, because we go every year, we've done it for years, and we go to every single gig, so I can't wait for that to come back. And then I think going forward in terms of support, I just hope we take the time, we don't put the jigsaw pieces back in the same place, because that's important. And that's, as you know, as Phil said, we've all touched on, it's really making sure that in building back, we listen to the voices we've not listened to before, and we come out with a fair and more equitable Greater Manchester.
Wonderful. What an incredible summary of what we've just done. She's doing my job for me. It's amazing. So thank you so much to all of you for your input. It's been a much more optimistic discussion than it perhaps could have been. And I think there is that real appetite that we do want to get back to, you know, working, leaving the house, all of those things. But what there isn't an appetite for is going back to exactly where we were before. You know, we've put over and over again that, you know, we've got all of this amazing stuff coming through. There has been a question pop up in the Q&A, which I think was kind of answered as we were going through, is, you know, we had this kind of, you know, Goldman Sachs and Boris Johnson's also mentioned it in his conversation with Rail, that, you know, we'll all just go back to working 5 days a week from the office. And I think we've kind of fairly roundly decided that, you know, that's not the way it's going to be. You know, yes, we will come back into offices, but we will do it in a more flexible way. We talked about, you know, those kind of rota systems that we might start to see in place. And I think what's been really positive for me is listening to all of you talk, that stage one has been listening, that it's not as business, this is what we want to do, or as a city, this is what we want to do. It's like, well, actually, what do we need, and how can we make that work, which is really refreshing. I think is what will mean that we have a really sustainable growth to enjoy as we come out the other side. So looking ahead then to what else is in the Spark programme. Next week is all going to be around creating happy teams. So we've touched on it a few times today around kind of some of the struggles that people have been through over the lockdown, managing remote teams and starting to come back to whatever that new normal might look like. So I hope you can join us for that. The week after, we'll be doing building sustainable cities. We'll be looking at zero carbon buildings. We'll be looking at sustainable ways of using offices, as well as that sustainable travel piece around electric vehicles will include. We're then finally going to come up to the Spark Summit. I feel like I've been talking about it forever, and I'm so excited that we can finally release that. Interviews with David McDowell, who's the CEO of Brewdog, with John Roberts, who's the founder and CEO of AO. We also have community aspects from the Growing Project and the Royal Exchange Theatre. We've got Jaguar Land Rover talking about some of their electrification work. So just a whole range of amazing speakers talking about sustainability, community and innovation. So do also join us then on the 25th of March. So finally then, just to say thank you to everybody for joining us, and whether you're joining us live or watching this back, we will make sure that the links to all the extra support that have been mentioned in this are shared out with you. And thanks once again to all of my panellists. Thank you.